and we stay in football, we already previewed, if you missed it in the first hour, we previewed Valley Christian Lisbon, and we previewed Columbiana and Latonia. Let's go to United and see what the Eagles are bringing back and what they have to try to replace coming into this season.
Well, the Eagles last year, as you know, they were 5-1 in the regular season, and they were a part of that three-way tie with Latonia and Southern Local. They were 7-3 overall after the fact, and it was a part of a very good scoring offense last year, and a scoring offense that had just under 35 points per game, almost 400 yards of total offense per game, and it's an offense that's bringing back a lot of those guys that were there last year. 7 returning starters on the offensive team, but there was some big losses, and amongst those losses was a boatload of wide receivers. Guys such as Keaton Baker was a big one. Nate Miller was another one, as two guys that were really I think big, huge playmakers for them, as well as Cameron Marshall on the offensive line. Brutus Oligaev, the quarterback for them last year too, is no longer there. But I mean, as far as the guys on returning on offense, you got a couple guys on the offensive line, but Payne Brewerton is the big one, I think, to watch out for. Lincoln Ermson, the running back for them, is going to be a huge one. Nick Hardgrove is a tremendous athlete for them. Grant Knight's another big wide receiver name, but it's a team that has, I think, a lot of solid pieces still on that offense. And I mean, it's just a very athletic team overall. And I think that's part of the reason why they were able to be so efficient scoring wise, is just they were able to get on those outside edges and just beat you with pure speed and athleticism.
You know, last year, everyone talked about Keaton Baker on the wide receiver, and obviously they should. Keaton Baker put up a lot of great numbers. But I'm telling you, Grant Knight, that whole family is just built tall. He's a tall guy. He's perfectly built for a wide receiver. He's got great hands. I think he's going to be one of the players that takes a step in the limelight for United. He'll have a new quarterback throwing to him. But yeah. I think he's going to be one of the best targets in United, and his whole family is kind of on the tall edge. So,
I mean, looking at quarterback position, that's going to be the biggest question, because I mean, losing Brutus it's not a scoff over. I mean, he led UAC in pretty much every quarterback category: passing touchdowns, passing yards, completion percentage. He was the dynamic playmaker out of the quarterback position for them last year. So being able to replace him at quarterback is going to be difficult. But if they can get somebody in there, and I know they have a camp of guys that they're getting to compete for that, but they still have pieces there to make a quarterback very successful.
Yeah, and I think so too. And when you have targets to throw to, all of a sudden being a quarterback is a lot easier than if you're kind of going and you're having to build relationships with people you've never seen before. I think it won't be you don't want to sidestep how important Brutus Ogilvie was to that offense, but I don't think it'll be as big of a drop off as some people might think if you're looking at United's quarterback situation. But let's talk about their defense, and on the other side, what things to look forward to for United's defensive unit.
They allowed less than 20 points per game last year, which is tremendous. I think it was a little bit over 18, actually, and they're returning a bunch of starters because a lot of those guys play two-way. So Grant Knight plays defensive back. Cameron Marshall is on defensive line. Caden Marshall is a linebacker. Lincoln Ermson is a defensive end. As far as guys that they lost, Cameron Marshall is the guy they lost. Caden Marshall is the guy I was talking about, linebacker. Cameron Marshall is one of the guys they lost. Garrett Bailey, defensive back, is another guy that they lost. But Caden Marshall, the other Marshall, is the one guy I think is a guy to watch. He's a linebacker, as well as Grant Knight, too, defensive back for them. Two guys that are just tremendous athletes, part of a very good athletic team that United is putting together. And I think that's why United is going to be so good. And defense, that's half the battle, as you know, is getting great athletes in positions. And half the battle is if you can get a good athlete, you could put him somewhere on defense and you could figure things out. And that's what United has. They have a bunch of athletes, and it's pretty easy to figure out defense when you have a bunch of athletes, because you can put one here, and let them figure it out, because typically those guys that are really athletic, they figure it out pretty quickly.
And the thing about the people that are good athletes, and United has a lot of them, as you said, they just find ways to make plays. You know what I mean? They'll learn football IQ as the season goes, but they'll just find ways to find the ball and make plays. And if you can kind of let them adjust quickly on the football IQ and making smart decisions, they're going to be really dangerous. Athletic kids are always very dangerous because they can just go make plays. And I think you're going to see a lot of that with United.
I mean, you're talking about Caden Marshall, too, as a sophomore, over 100-plus tackles in a season, too. You expect the same sort of success going into his junior year this year, too, and he takes another step of improvement in his career as well. So, I mean, a lot of room to improve, too, for Caden Marshall, and he's already pretty darn good as one of the leaders on this defense, and, I mean, he's going to be one guy to look for.
If that defense is going to definitely put down Marshall's law all season long. And
that'd be a great one.
If they had green dots in the helmet in high school, he would definitely be the guy in the defense, I think, that would wear that green helmet and would be the communication leader and be one of the leaders despite being a junior. I mean, you can have junior captains. We just talked about junior captain for the volleyball team at Fitch. So junior leader of that team, been there, done that, and he knows what's going on. They're going to lean on him a lot this year on defense.
It just happens when you have success at an early age like that. When you have that type of success at a sophomore year, it commands respect. And I mean, that's one thing. I mean, certain leadership qualities, they're there too. But it's not always about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about performance as well. And sometimes being the sophomore that quietly goes out there and has a season like that doesn't really say too much, but doesn't really need to, because his performance spoke words for him beyond anything he could have ever said. And I mean, that's why you get put in those type of positions, because people just look at that type of success and they want to know, how is that guy doing what he's doing, or what is he doing different? And, then success breeds success is what we know.
You know what else? You can't teach some leadership qualities. Like, you either have them or you don't, in the personality types. Mm-hmm. And Caden Marshall has it. He has the leadership qualities. He's there. And that's one of the things that it's got to be very, very exciting for Coach Ogilvie. The fact that he doesn't have to teach him how to lead. He doesn't have to teach him how to be that personality. It's already ingrained into his DNA. So that's going to be a big plus.
I think out of those teams we were talking about, United, Latonia, and Southern Local, I think out of those three teams, United is probably best situated from last year to this year, is I think returning the most as far as starters is concerned out of those three teams. And they're the ones I think that are sitting the most pretty as far as knowing what they have in front of them going from last year to this year, where every other team's got to try to figure out some spots and see what they have in those areas, where United pretty much had their team kind of figured out before the season started.
Let's talk about United's schedule and start with the non-conference and see what they have looking in front of them.
Non-conference wise, they're home versus Minerva. They're at East Canton August 27th, and then home versus Crestview September 3rd. So not shying away from competition, especially. And I'm looking forward to that home matchup versus Crestview on September 3rd. Yeah,
I think we talked about that one when we talked about Crestview last week. It's going to be an interesting kind of game because, both teams replacing some skill positions, returning a lot internally, like in the lines and stuff. But, when you look at that matchup, the one thing that glares out to you is Crestview's obviously returning their quarterback in Anthony Cusick, and United's got a new one. So I think same thing when you talk about Springfield South Range, that might be something that you look at for an advantage for one team over the other. But it's going to be a fun game with a lot of athletes and a lot of people that can beat you in different ways. And I think United will have a couple of players that might use that game to really stand in the limelight, whether they win or lose. They're gonna have success in that game.
It's part of another one of those great matchups that's on the docket for this season. And I mean, another one of those non-conference matchups that's on the docket for the season that you're really looking forward to. I mean, these are two teams that were atop of each of their conferences respectively. And these are two teams that are going to be looking to be, I would think, very successful this year as well. So it's one of those games too, where you don't get to see them every single year. So appreciate this matchup while we have it too. Crestview and United playing each other. It's going to be a fun one, I think, on September 3rd.
Yeah, and it'll get them right into that EOAC schedule, talk about how that lines up and what the Eagles will be looking forward to after starting those three games in the non-conference slate.
They're home versus Valley Christian on September 10th. Then on September 17th, they're at Latonia. September 24th at Columbiana. October 1st, home versus East Palestine. 8th at Wellsville. 15th at Lisbon. And a big home October 22nd game versus Southern. that might have huge playoff implications when everything's all said and done. Of course, we know Southern was atop the division last year as well, so this is going to be a huge interconference game too between two teams atop of their conference last year.
Yeah, I mean, you got to talk about that last game and what it boils down. I mean, you look at the way United's schedule is structured; they might come into that last game in a very good position to be in the top of the EOAC. Southern might too. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. That game could very well decide who wins the EOAC. That's a big last game of the season.
Yeah, that's a big last game of the season. And also that Latonia matchup, that other team that was in the top 3 in that race, that week 5 game where after you have to face teams like East Canton and Crestview, face Valley Christian and Minerva, it's realistic to see about a 2-2 record there. You might be 3-1, you might be 1-3, what have you, either way. But I mean, that's a big week 5 game that's gonna really either propel you for this season, or it could shoot you down and make you really have to try to figure things out rapidly if you lose that one. So that's a huge game too against Latonia, and that's at the Bears September 17th.
Yeah, I mean, how fun would it be if that week 10 we could say this is the EOAC championship? I mean, you'll get a lot of opportunities week 10 to say this is a conference championship game, but we might get that opportunity week 10 to say this is really like conference championship game. Winner takes the top spot.
Absolutely. I mean, if we expect United to have the same sort of success that they did last year, I think this will definitely be that October 22nd Southern game is definitely going to be a huge one come that time. And I think it might have big playoff implications too.
Yeah, and I'm also looking forward to United versus Columbiana. We kind of highlighted a little bit when we talked about Columbiana earlier. But two of the teams that like to throw it a little bit more than the rest of the teams in the conference, that might be the game where we see a lot of fireworks and a lot of high scoring and a lot of chucking the ball down the field more than maybe some of the other EOAC matchups. So maybe the highest scoring matchup of the league schedule, Columbiana versus United, when you combine the scores.
Yeah, and I think it might be one of those games too, and it's coming right after Latonia, where they might be beat up after the Bears. So Columbiana might be able to get some shots in early too that maybe United's not expecting. So it could be a very fun back and forth game for sure.